Hey guys, welcome back to Gamer Bargains. Today we're going to be talking about CPUs and some of the characteristics and things that you need to know before making purchases or upgrades and things like that. So let's get right in. Hey guys, today we're doing CPUs. So today with me I have two examples. So I have this spare Celeron processor. Now this is a 2-core, 2-thread processor, so it only has as many threads as it does cores. So now this is just an example. I can't physically show you the CPU because it's in my actual personal rig, but this is a 5900X from AMD. Now this thing has 12 cores and 24 threads. Okay, now we're going to talk about a few things about each of these processors because I have one Intel and I have one AMD. So the first thing is two different companies, right? All right, so this will use a different, these are, and here I'll even open it up so you can see it too. I can't show you an AMD one because I don't have a spare AMD processor, but I could just tell you about them, okay? So I'm gonna open this up. This is what CPU packages usually look like. Now when you're holding your CPU, you're just gonna wanna hold it by its edges. You're not gonna wanna touch the pins or the grids at all. So you always just wanna hold it, on the edges, okay? Now you could see, and I'll try not to get in the reflection of the light, which is gonna be hard, but you can see that it's just flat. So this is a grid array. So this is why this is called LGA, which is what Intel uses. It's a grid array because they're just like, they're just little pads. So AMD right now currently, which it could change, but currently on their AM4 sockets, they use pins. So you'll see a bunch of little gold pins, just as many as there's pads here, okay? So that is the difference between AMD and Intel right now. AMD is still on pins and Intel is on the grid array or the pads. So one thing is you need to make sure to match the correct socket to your CPU, right? So this is an AM4 socket, so you would want to use an AM4 motherboard. And if you're not sure about motherboards and things like that, right up here in this, I'll have a card up here and you could check out my previous video for motherboards. So you want to make sure you use the correct socket because every CPU has a different socket that it fits. And that is generally, like, you could just think of it as an easy way we'll just say it, it's the shoe. You need to make sure that this foot that you put in the shoe, which is your motherboard, fits, or else it won't boot. You could also bend pins, you could damage things, so you always want to make sure that you use the correct socket, okay? So now we're going to get into cores and threads, okay? So obviously this is a Celeron processor. This is a low-end CPU. Usually when we're not in this crazy pandemic crap right now, usually you could get this for like, this little Celeron, you get this for $50, and I'm gonna put this back in its case now. But usually you could get these for like $50-$60, and it's not a big deal, right? Because there's just like, and I think the newer ones now, because this is an older one, this is a 3930, so it's from the 3rd Intel family. So usually the newer ones I think are 2 cores and 4 threads. We're starting to move to where everything has multiple threads, and we're getting away from single thread use. So now this one has 12 cores and 24 threads, and you're like, well, Jarrett, what are threads and why are they important to us? So when you look at your task manager and you see the statistics where it says you have 12 physical cores and then you have 24 logical cores, right? So we'll say we're using this 5900X. The logical cores are virtual cores, and what that does is it allows to have, you can have 2 processes on one single core, because you know, while the computer is thinking, let's say you're running a program, and let's say it's using, we're just going to use this as an example, one core, right? And it only has one thread. The problem with that, though, is while it's computing and talking, there may be delays waiting for the memory to buff or getting information. So having two cores for every, or having two threads for every one core is important, because if it's waiting for information on thread 1, it will switch to thread 2 and then get information there, and then it will go back to thread 1. So it allows for faster computation, pretty much. So you want to have as many cores and as many threads as you can have. If you're looking for a really fast, responsive system, having something like this, the 5900X, that there's only one more above this one, which is the 5950. So unless you're going to go with a Threadripper or something like that. So the next thing that that's just kind of a little bit of a breakdown about threads. So there's a lot more that goes into that. I was just giving you just a generic thing. Threads are virtual or logical cores that allows your computer to do more processes. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about base and boost clock, okay? And it's going to be probably pretty hard to see this. So I got a light here. Let's turn that off. So let's see if we can't. Okay, on this here, you can see that there's a base and a boost. So on the base and boost, okay, and this is in boost. So the base is the bottom line that the CPU will operate, right? This says 3.7 gigahertz, okay? That is the base, the lowest the clock will go down to, right? And then it says here is 4.8 gigahertz for the boost. Now, it probably won't boost to that all the time, because there's variables that come into consideration while it's boosting. It's going to depend on your motherboard, how much voltage it can give. So it's about how much voltage, you know what I mean? And temperature, because those things are going to play around with each other, and that's going to dictate what your boost is. So like I have a custom loop that's water cooled on this, so I get really good boost on mine for longer durations because I have a really good cooling solution. So if you're just using, I wouldn't even know why people would use this, but you could use a stock AMD cooler on this and you would not be doing very good. So you have to be able to deliver enough voltage, you know what I mean? And it has to be within the temperatures, because if it starts to thermal throttle, or if it starts to get too hot in the parameters, it will start to tune itself down so that way it cools off. And when it's cooling off and it's lowering the clock speed, that means your boost clock's going down. So, and it will also depend on your workload and what kind of things you're doing. If you're just like surfing the web and just going on Facebook and Amazon, it's not going to boost. You don't need that much performance right there. Maybe if you're editing some video or something like that, yeah, you're going to hit your boost clock. So your boost clock is when the CPU senses that it needs to do more work and needs to get the computations done faster, so it'll boost as high it can go, as long as you have the voltage and the temperatures are low enough. All right, guys, if you guys like this content, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Characteristic with so the difference between AMD and Intel up until about their 12th gen, up until their 10th, 11th gen, Intel was severely lacking L3 cache. Now, L3 cache, that is onboard memory that is on the CPU itself, okay? And that doesn't make it faster, but what it does is it gives you better latency, which means it's more responsive. It's proven that the bigger the L3 cache is on a CPU, the better the latency is. So that's why AMD usually has really, big L3 cache in all their processors here. So as far as cooling solutions go, So for cooling your CPU, you have a few choices. Now, some CPUs, you know, like this Celeron processor here, it comes with a fan, a basic generic fan. You know, just the bare bones Intel stock heatsink. Now this, it does not come with any cooling solution, so make sure you pay attention to those things if you're buying a CPU. Some of them come with heat sinks, some of them do not. So you will have to buy some type of cooling solution, whether it's in, you know, just a regular, you know, just a heat sink with a fan, or if you're going to do a closed AIO, or if you're going to do a custom water loop, or so those are your things that you got to consider. The next thing you also need to consider, though, is that some CPUs, okay, so you have this Celeron here, right? This thing has onboard graphics, which means that if I need to, let's say I don't have a graphics card, and you know, that way you could see the picture from the motherboard. There'll be, you know, an HDMI out or a DVI out, depending on how old your stuff is. You know what I mean? And there'll be something for you to plug a monitor into on your back I/O that comes with your motherboard, and you'll be able to use your machine, right? You'll be able to see a picture, right? Now this one here, this one does not have any graphics whatsoever, which means that it says here that you have to have discrete graphics card required, right? Okay, so that's another thing you need to consider. Are you going to have a graphics card in your system? And if you're not, make sure you buy a CPU that does not say that it does not come with a graphics card, or that discrete graphics card is needed. So that's something to pay attention to while you're buying your CPUs, because like I said, some of them come with them. Some of them don't have any onboard graphics. So so keep that in mind when you're buying them. Okay, so I'm hoping that this video was helpful to you guys, kind of broke down some things, give you guys some, you know, general ideas of how these things work, and to kind of help you inform you, make a better decision, you know, while you guys go buy your next set of hardware. All right, guys, I will see you next time.